Does your child sometimes act impulsively? Do they say whatever comes to their mind sometimes without filtering? Do they sometimes just grab people or walk into a room and start touching things? Do they say things without thinking about how their actions will have towards somebody else? Do they even do things where you tell them not to do things because it might hurt them, like touch a hot stove, and they instantly want to do it? They struggle to stop themselves from taking that action. That was definitely my son when he was younger. Thankfully, that one he's grown out of. But it used to be my one fear. We actually stopped, we'd never use the front burners of the stove when he was smaller because we knew the temptation to touch would just be too much for him and he couldn't stop it. This lack of inhibition can lead to social or emotional misunderstandings, often leaving parents totally overwhelmed. And these kids with impulsivity can be hitting, yelling, screaming, arguments, all of these things that just cause so much chaos. Oh, another one I didn't mention is not being able to stop talking. So they might just be talking all of the time. That can also be an inhibition struggle. The definition of inhibition. Inhibition is the opposite of impulsivity. So impulsivity is where we don't stop, go in and just do things without thinking it through. Inhibition is actually the ability to not react on impulse. It allows children, as well as us adults, to pause and think before acting, which helps us avoid certain behaviors like interrupting others, making impulsive decisions, or reacting emotionally without thinking through the consequences. I can think of things just myself in past where, in hindsight, you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't have said that, or I wish I hadn't have done that. Some things are just small because they were just embarrassing for you. And some things do affect other people. It affects relationships. And inhibition may look like where we're struggling to act on impulse. So grabbing something without asking, or blurting out in class, struggling to think about possible consequences before acting, such as running into the street or starting tasks without understanding the instructions. May lack a filter, often saying or doing things without considering the impact on others. This is all inhibition. Now, in order for a child or an adult to have inhibition, it requires two things. The first thing is foresight, which is where they're able to actually pre-experience that image or a future goal. And the second one is stopping. So in order to have that ability to not act on impulse, we need to first have foresight, and second, stop what we are currently doing or stop an action from happening. And this requires the other base executive functioning skills that we have been speaking of. So in this series, we have covered perception, attention, verbal working memory, and nonverbal working memory, which are the base foundational executive functioning skills. If you have not listened to those, I highly recommend you go back and listen to them, because with inhibition, they require attention, which means they need to notice what they're doing first and what they should be doing. So for example, even on the playground, a child needs to first notice that they're going down the slide constantly going down the slide. And then they need the perception, perceiving that somebody else is upset. They see that a friend is standing there upset. And, or if they've blurted something out, right? They need to first perceive, is this going to hurt somebody's feelings, or is this okay to say? And they need to have the attention on that person as well. So they need both of those. And then they need the image in their brain of what they should be doing and the consequences. And you may have kids that know the consequences. They may know the consequences of continuing to be on a video game or continuing to be playing or doing whatever it is that they're doing instead of doing their homework. They know the consequence of not getting that homework done. But if they don't have the ability to stop, then they are not able to inhibit themselves. So they may have some of these skills already. They may already have the attention on what they're doing. They may already have the perception. They may know the image of what's going to happen in their brain. They may already understand that goal, but they're not able to stop. So they need both things, that foresight, which requires the attention, perception, nonverbal working memory. And then they need to stop, which requires their attention, their perception, and their nonverbal working memory in a different way. So the goal with inhibition is to increase their awareness and get them to pause. That pause is so important to get them to pause and perceive the situation and visualize what they should be doing instead, then to change the behavior. Because they may already know the consequence, but they're not pausing to really be able to elicit and engage that perception and attention executive functioning skill. And so it's really, really important to understand that telling them to stop is very different from asking them to pause for a second. Very, very different ways of approaching this. It sounds so similar, but if you stop and take a look at that, if I sit beside a child who is struggling to get off of their phone, and I maybe put my hand on them and have them look at me in a calm, caring way and say, hey, and get them to actually perceive what's happened, get them to see where their focus or their attention is on, get them to see the vision, their goal in their mind. That's very different than saying, stop doing that. Stop hitting your sibling. Stop yelling. Stop talking so much. Stop. Oh man, my mind's blank on all of these other inhibition things. Oh yeah. Stop saying things to your friends that are hurtful. Stop sliding. Just to yell it and say it, that kid is so in the moment, they need that pause. So when our executive functioning system is taxed, it's very, very, very tough to pay attention, to perceive everything around us and have that foresight on the visuals in our brain and inhibit ourselves. When there are so many distractions, it's hard to inhibit. So this is where we may find that our child is okay at home when it's quiet. They may struggle at school when there's so much going on. They may struggle if they're in the middle of a sports game. They may struggle to not hit or yell at the person beside them if there's so much going on in that sport or activity. If they're playing a game, if they're on the playground, you may find that when your child is more distracted, when they're doing their homework and they're required to, we've talked about this in others as to when to do your homework. There's so many high-level executive functioning skills. You need planning, analyzing, time, sense, and pacing, self-modulation to be able to find any mistakes that you're doing, self-correcting to be able to correct those mistakes. You have initiation to get started with the task. You may have cognitive flexibility, perception, attention. The amount of executive functioning skills in order to do even homework is going to be taxing somebody's executive functioning system. You may have other things that just, you were at a fun party the day before that day, and there was a lot of sugar and the kids were really, really excited. There's so many distractions that you might find the behaviors change after because their executive functioning system is taxed. Or you were out really late at a very fun event and sleep has caused that individual to be very tired. Their executive functioning is going to be taxed and they are going to struggle with inhibition the next day. And this is something that I didn't speak of in attention. I had so much going on with attention. I had to pick and choose what to dive into when I did that lesson. One thing to note about attention is if we think of our brain like a whiteboard, and all of these things go on to this whiteboard, right? In order to be able to focus, the more things on our whiteboard, just from our regular life, the more things on our whiteboard, the more our attention is being taken. So we have homework. Maybe there's a song we're remembering the lyrics from and we just love it in our mind, or a dance routine that we really want to do. Maybe just our morning routine, getting dressed, brushing our teeth, making our bed, eating breakfast, packing our backpack. All of these things are visually in our brain. They're on that whiteboard. And then we also might have on our whiteboard that yesterday we were upset by a friend and they yelled at us or were upset at us, or the child did that to somebody else and they're ruminating on it. That is all in the whiteboard. They may have made a mistake, and or they have a ton of questions popping up in their brain, and all of this is on that whiteboard still. They may play a sport and are super, super busy. They may have a schedule to keep. They may be thinking about Pokemon, what deck they want to create. They may be thinking about Minecraft, their video game, Fortnite, whatever. They may be thinking about all of these things, all the things they want to build. All of this goes onto that whiteboard. And the more that is on their whiteboard, the more their attention is taken to other things, and the more that they are going to struggle with inhibition. And then let's add in screens. So screens have such a high working memory demand. So working memory, we spoke about in the last 2 lessons, verbal working memory and non-verbal working memory. There is phonics. They have to remember the sound of all the words, of any words that are being spoken or written on screen. They have to think about the phonics of that, the visuals of everything on the screen, every tab, all the icons that are out there, all of the different buttons to push, the different sections. Like when you go onto a web page, there's the buttons and there's so many colors and things to be looking of. All of those visuals go into your brain. The amount of attention that is used on their whiteboard. So think of not even all the things in life that we just spoke of, because all those things are on their whiteboard already. And then we add in everything from the screens. When they're playing Minecraft, the amount of visuals is unbelievable. Think of every single thing that keeps flashing on the screen and coming in and coming out. And they have to make on their, oh my gosh, what's that table where they create everything on their table, and having to remember what all of the supplies that they have, what the supplies that they need, what they're working for. The amount of working memory demand is unbelievable. The tabs that they're clicking, the games that they're playing, the things that they need to do and not do. Like we have to stop clicking those tabs, but it's hard to, I know when my son was doing virtual, it's interesting because now that he's doing homeschooling, it's very different because he's more engaged in the subjects he's doing. But when he was doing virtual school and it was a teacher that was on the screen, that their classes weren't designed to be taught virtually. They didn't have all these engaging things to pull these kids in and suck them in. And their classes, these teachers were not taught all the tech and how to do things. So it was so different when we were in lockdown, and my son would be constantly clicking tabs. Tabs were opening, tabs were closing, tabs were doing things. He was never, rarely watching his teacher. He also had a very old school teacher who didn't know tech, that he would write a math question on a piece of paper and put it up to the screen, right? So in that, the demands weren't high at all, that they wanted more stimulation from something else. And there are people that are paid to keep you sucked into their platform. This is why we as adults struggle with this. I do have podcast episodes on this. I've been interviewed on this. I was recently interviewed by a large newspaper, all about screens and their effects on kids and their brains. And it is unbelievable with the executive functioning struggles. And as I say all the time, I teach my kids this, that there are people that are paid a lot of money to keep you on their platform. And if they were not doing a good job, they would be fired and somebody else would replace them. So if we are struggling to get off of somebody's platform, that's because somebody's doing a really good job. And we need to work around that, which is where we use a lot of blocking apps and different things to help us during our school time, our work time, to help us not go on to all of those other platforms that keep pulling us in. The executive functioning system is already taxed before we get on screens. And then when it's on screens, the taxing of it just goes out the window. And then we get to trying to get them off. Getting a child off a screen, they need to use attention to notice what they're doing and what they should be doing. Their perception to perceive that someone is upset, or that something could upset somebody if they don't get off the screen, or perceiving what they're supposed to be doing instead. Their nonverbal working memory is to imagine image is in their brain of what they should be doing, what the consequences are of not getting off, and what they're not doing. all of this, while we think of that whiteboard that I spoke of with attention, is filled with everything on the screen. Everything that those people that are paid to suck them into that game or whatever they're doing online, that person who's paid lots and lots of money keeps pulling their attention away, keeps moving the images in their nonverbal working memory to the images on the screen instead of the images that they're supposed to be thinking of for the consequences and for getting off. Their perception as well, like their perception is pulled over. They're not even thinking about anything else other than what is right in front of them on the screen. So getting a child off is so hard. And telling that child to stop doing something is not an easy ask, especially when it's stopping getting off the screen. They have to do so many things in order to actually stop and pause that video game and then getting off of it. So we need to teach them one step at a time, just like learning everything else, right? When we teach a kid to ride a bike, we don't just expect that they're going to get on that bike and ride, but we somehow have this perception as parents, even though we struggle to get off of our screens, that it should just be quick and easy for our kids. And I will tell you that it took us months with my kids of trying different strategies, working through things, them failing a lot and me not getting upset with them for failing. We would talk about it after. Okay, how hard was that to get off the screen? How much time did you go over? Okay, why did that happen? What could we implement? What could we instill in here instead to help with that issue that came up? And my kids have 2 or 3 alarms now set where one of those alarms lets them know that the other alarm is going to go off soon, so that they know that it's coming, just to prepare them to know it's coming. Then they have one alarm that says they have to be off in 5 minutes, and they've had to pause during that alarm and think about, okay, now I need to start switching gears to start coming off of this game. If another game is starting, I won't start it. If I need to finish building something, what do I need to finish build in 5 minutes? Or what can I do in the next 5 minutes to be satisfied with this build before I shut it off in 5 minutes? Like all of these things, we had to go through and talk about all of these situations, all these scenarios. It took us months. And there still are times when I know that my child's executive functioning system is taxed, that they're going to struggle getting off. And we talk about this before we go, and we're like, how are you feeling? How's this going? Sometimes they will do breathing before they go on screens because that starts to clear their whiteboard a little bit in their brain. And so they're going into it with less of a whiteboard. Usually they'll come up to us and they're like, I've had my water, I've had a healthy snack, I've done my breathing, I've gone outside for a walk. Can I go on screens now? And all of these things they know, because we've helped them understand too, help to take stress off of their body so they have more bandwidth in their executive functioning system. It helps to support their executive functioning system. It helps to get a lot of those visuals off of their whiteboard. And it helps to prepare them so that they can actually get off easier. And my kids know this. And it still isn't foolproof. Even for us, it's not foolproof. So we've had to really work hard with that inhibition of getting off the screens, with working through these plans, finding out what works. My kids, they both have different alarms set. They both have different reminders, different strategies for each of them for getting off, because they have different personalities and their executive functioning system is stronger for some of them in different skills and weaker in other skills. So we've had to adapt our plan of getting off of video games different for each child based on their executive functioning skills. That's why there is no one answer to it. That's why when I'm teaching this in the support circle, I'm teaching frameworks. I'm teaching frameworks to you to help you work through it. And I will tell you that no plan that you ever work on with a child is the plan that it ends up with. It always adapts and changes over time as you learn how to improve that plan to work for the child. We want certain things to not work, so we can talk through this child and teach them about, hey, that didn't work. What can we do instead to start working that cognitive flexibility, to start working on mistakes are okay, to work on, hey, this is a testing thing. Not everything's going to work the first time. All of these skills are so important for a child. And the plan we start with is not the plan that is going to end up with. So the main thing with inhibition is it is really about creating space to pause. We need to teach them how to pause before reacting. And that's what creates healthy relationships. It allows others to talk when they pause. When they pause, it allows others to have a turn. When they pause, it gives them time to consider what they're saying or doing before saying or doing it, before hitting, before blurting out in class, before saying something to somebody else that might be hurtful to them, even though to that child they think, oh, it's just a black and white thought. It's just a fact. They shouldn't be upset about the fact that they're not good at this, and I'm going to tell them that. They need to really take that time to pause. And we can't work on every single inhibition struggle that a child is having. We have to work on one first. And if they don't have that pause and they're in the moment, then that's when we have to implement different strategies and different skills, because their stress system is taxed at a different degree, and it can really make a difference. So with executive functioning, as I've mentioned in all of the lessons that we have gone over today in perception, attention, verbal working memory, nonverbal working memory, with all executive functioning, the brain, the executive functioning system is fully developed around the ages of 23 to 25. That does not mean as an adult that we can't work on things. I have only learned this year that my verbal working memory, it sucks. And I have through the years worked on some inhibition struggles, some initiation struggles, attention. I'm really have been working a lot on attention recently, the more that I've been diving into research and like really deep dives into it. I'm like, ooh, okay, these are things that I can work on. So as an adult, you can work on your executive functioning system. It's just that before 23 to 25, some of it is that we need the executive functioning system to develop a little bit more. And some of it is that it's easier to work and support on executive functioning skills that are really affecting your daily life with these kids. Some of this inhibition affects so much of their relationships, found to be a behavior problem at school, could be due to initiation. Not initiation, to inhibition. Well, it could be an initiation too if they're not starting assignments, but inhibition. Inhibition can cause so many social, emotional, physical struggles with your child, hitting, yelling, screaming. This is my one child. And these are things that we may want to support and help them develop as their executive functioning system is growing. And it's easier to do before the ages of 23 to 25 to help them support those. After that, it just takes a few more reps and sets on a more frequent basis in order to help and support it. And what you'll find is as the child is growing, that their inhibition might appear again. So when a child maybe through elementary is doing really well, and then they get to high school and the inhibition appears. I've seen this with one child that my kids hang out with, that as he's gone to middle school and as the demands have increased, some of his inhibition, the poking other kids and hiding things from other kids and doing all these things that he finds really funny, but the kids are getting frustrated with and not actually wanting to hang out with him, has increased, especially when he has tests coming up, especially when he's had some late nights. So you might find that it could be through a growth spurt that you start seeing some of these executive functioning system struggles appear. And then after the growth spurt, they're okay. You may find just certain things happening at school, or maybe you had a wedding or an event. And then after these executive functioning systems struggle, or middle school, high school, college, moving out on their own, you might see things reappear as different stages of life happen in their executive functioning system. All right, as with every lesson, I have gone through questions that I have in my intake form. Today's intake form questions are going to be on inhibition, and the link for my full form is below. So you can grab that form, which has every single executive functioning skill, every definition, and a block of questions or statements that you will answer true, somewhat true, never true, or in the past. In the past, we just spoke of, that could be where they grow out of it. And then you might find later on at another stage it appears again, or the child may not have that struggle anymore because of the work that you've put in and that executive functioning system is supported the way it needs to be. So we're going to go through this. And I know that I found with my son and clients constantly, when they go through this form, they're like, oh my God, I finally feel like my child is being seen. I finally feel like somebody understands my child when they go through this self-assessment form. So click the link below and go through this form, and let's go through the inhibition intake form questions right now. So struggles with acting on impulses, such as grabbing something without asking or blurting out in class. True, somewhat true, never true, or was true in the past. If it's in the past, congratulations on the work you've done with this child. Struggles to think about possible consequences before acting, such as running onto the street or starting a task without understanding the instructions. I do want to just go on to this one. So running onto the street, if their verbal working memory is able to take that imprint, let's say they run on the street and they see the cars coming, they're going to have that visual image in their brain. But when they don't have that nonverbal working memory ability, if that is one of the skills that's struggling in them, they may continually keep running out because they don't have that foresight. They don't have that ability of that image in their brain to go, oh, if I run out and there is a car coming without me looking, I'm going to get hit. They may not have that. So it's some of these things, those possible consequences they don't think of before acting. And if I think about this, my husband's nonverbal working memory struggles a lot. And we're very active in sports. And he used to be the guy that would run and chase any ball and get injured doing it because he'd go into bleachers, he'd hit poles, all kinds of things. And if I think about it now, that's his nonverbal working memory. He didn't have that visual that the pole was there, or that those things were so close as well, to have the foresight of, oh, I shouldn't go so far, which is fascinating. But he's such an incredible athlete that he would quite often get the ball and the ball would come back. He'd just be injured in the moment as he's doing it as well. Not injured enough to not play, but he might scrape a knee or have a bruise on him and stuff. And it used to baffle me, but now that I'm thinking about it, his nonverbal working memory is not great. And that's a huge part of inhibition, of stopping himself from going after a ball. So the next one is appears inattentive at times, appears impulsive, may shout in class or interpret rather than raise their hand or wait their turn to speak. Lacks a filter, often saying or doing things without considering the impact, or without considering that it might hurt somebody's feelings. Appears disruptive or disrespectful at times due to acting on impulses without considering the effect on others. Struggles to resist distractions even when they know they should focus on something else. Has difficulty waiting their turn during conversations or group activities. Frequently interrupts others during conversations or while they're working. Tends to shout out in class instead of raising their hand. Bounces quickly from thought to thought or action to action. Struggles to stay on topic when talking or writing. Appears disruptive, which is often misunderstood as behavior problems. This is a huge one for our kids with big emotions, is inhibition plays such a large role in what they keep getting into trouble with. And just telling them to stop doing it is not enough. They need all of the steps. They need the attention, the perception, the nonverbal working memory, and the ability to pause. They have difficulty walking into a room and avoiding touching others' things. Struggles to keep their hands to themselves, often invading others' personal space, touching other kids, touching everything around. Struggles to keep their hands to themselves when upset, such as poking, hitting, or kicking. This is my one child. As soon as anything in his perceived mind with cognitive inflexibility, he deems that it upset him, he will instantly go to hit that person, his brother, quite often. And we have to stop him. We have to say, pause, or get him to shift his attention quickly elsewhere and pause so that he can actually stop that action from happening. And he's getting a lot better at stopping himself from hitting. You'll see him sometimes like ball up his fists or do things. And sometimes he's not at all reacting anymore, which he's come so far. Has difficulty sharing with others. That could even be like sharing the slide. They're so excited going down a slide or playing an activity or doing something really fun that they love to do. And they don't even stop to think that somebody else would like to do it with them. Appears at times to not have a filter and say things without thinking of how it will affect or be understood by the other person. Struggles to control emotions when upset or frustrated. Has difficulty stopping frustration from influencing their reactions when things don't go their way. That is my son. Or I'm going to say was my son because he's improving on that so much. Uses comedy or joking to cover up struggles, attempting to hide them from others. Struggles socially with peers and adults due to impulse behaviors. Has trouble stopping themselves from doing something they know they shouldn't. Struggles to stop or change behavior once it has started, even when they know it's inappropriate, like continuing to talk after being asked to stop. Struggles with waiting for rewards or delaying gratification, preferring immediate results. So with your child there, is that true, somewhat true, never, or in the past? These are all in the intake form where the link is below. So inhibition is what helps us pause before we act. For kids, it's the skill that allows them to control impulses, think before reacting, and handling frustrating situations without immediate outbursts. Strong inhibition supports positive social interactions and emotional stability and changes that child from being looked at as being a behavior issue, struggle, or behavior problem to a child that is able to kind of react the way it is expected to react in a classroom and in other settings, in sports. So in the support circle, that is where I help with frameworks on this. This is where we help with, as we've spoke of, so many of the base skills. These are all like initiation. Sorry, I keep saying initiation. Inhibition. Inhibition is the last of the foundational skills that all of the other executive functioning skills build off of. And as you just saw, even though inhibition is, or as you heard, even inhibition is still a base foundational skill. It's still a kindling skill. It requires attention, perception, and nonverbal working memory in order for a child to inhibit themselves. So it is one of the more, I guess, taxing, difficult, complex of the base foundational executive functioning skills. Though these skills, perception, attention, verbal working memory, nonverbal working memory, and inhibition, are the foundational skills that all of the other skills are built on. And we need to make sure there's a really good solid base. And this is what I help with in the support circle. I help as well with all the stress. My background is as a stress coach by trade, working with first responders. So working with sleep, working with all of the different stress triggers that a child might have that could be taxing their stress system, taxing their executive functioning system. So it's this vicious cycle. When the stress system is taxed, the executive functioning system is taxed. When the executive functioning system is taxed, it taxes our stress system. And that can cause so many of these big emotions in our kids. So in the support circle, I'm also trauma informed. So I can work on some of the traumas from the perfectionism, from traumas that may have happened in your child, from being always told they're a problem child when they don't want to be a problem child, when it's actually something, an inhibition struggle, an executive functioning struggle, and they've been masking as well a lot of these struggles that they have. These can all go into traumas with kids too. So I work on all of these things in the support circle, helping with videos and tools. You can ask questions 24/7 by text in the group, and you can hop onto our weekly call. I vary the time of the call so that it works with different time zones, different schedules. If you can't make a call, you can ask a question ahead of time and I will answer it on the call. And I will take this intake form and I'll check if you've done an intake form. I will look through it very quickly before I answer your question to help me really get a better visual of your child. So I would love to see you in the support circle if you are not there, in order to be able to really help you understand your child more and be able to give you some supports and ideas that you can be giving to your therapist, to your occupational therapist, to your SLP, to any of the therapies that your child is working in, to the teachers, and as well things that you can be doing in your home to be able to really create a supportive environment for your child. All right, coming up next, we move into the next skills, the log skills. The kindling skills are the ones that we need to really get that fire going, and the logs are needed to create a really sustainable fire. And we are going to be unlocking the power of initiation. So this is where, have you ever wondered why your child can know exactly what they need to do, but they can't seem to start? Whether it's beginning their homework, tidying their room, or even putting on their shoes, they may struggle with initiation. And it can be an endless cycle of frustration for them and for you. I know with my one child, this is the thing that through the years, my one child has had phenomenal. This is not my big emotions child. This is my other one. He's had phenomenal teachers, and he's such a compliant child. Yet, I think there's been three teachers for sure that have pulled me aside and went, I can't get him to start this one assignment. And initiation is his struggle. We have found that starting a task is his biggest executive functioning struggle for my one child. And finishing the last step, like that step to actually complete the homework, that step to actually click the finish button, is where he struggles as well, which is fascinating. That's kind of initiation as well as inhibition. And so working with him has been fascinating on initiation. Initiation is a key executive functioning skill that really helps us take that first step, whether it's starting a new task, having a big project, planning out, for even just to start a plan, get their backpack started, get ready in the morning. That's all initiation. And we're moving a child from thinking about it to actually doing it. Without strong initiation skills, even the easiest tasks, the easiest ones that we get so frustrated with our kids for not doing, they're able to do once we start working with initiation. So in this next part of the series, we're going to be diving deep into why initiation is often a challenge for kids with big emotions, how they freeze response plays such a role in hesitation and avoidance, practical strategies to help kids build momentum and take that critical first step. Whether your child struggles with procrastination or overwhelm or perfectionism, this is definitely an episode that will give you tools to help them move forward with confidence. And I am so excited to see you there. So I will see you in the next lesson when we dive into initiation.